When I asked my son Anthony and his wife Eliana about their wedding plans, Anthony looked at me and said, "We got married already, Mom. Only special people were invited. I didn't want to invite you because my in-laws are high-standard people. I didn't want them to know you're my mother." In that moment, I felt my heart drop. The son I raised was ashamed of me, ashamed of the woman who gave him everything. Please, before I continue, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're hearing my story of revenge. I want to know how far it's gone. Because what you're about to hear isn't just a story about betrayal. It's a story about how life and karma have their own way of balancing things out. My name is Mrs. Renate Cooper. Anthony wasn't just my son. He was my reason for breathing for over 30 years. I raised him on my own after his father passed away when he was only 6. We didn't have much, but I made sure he never felt it. I worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices during the day and doing laundry for other families at night. Every dime I made went into his education, his comfort, his future. And to hear him say those words, that he was ashamed of me, it felt like someone ripped my heart out and crushed it in front of me. I still remember the way Eliana stood behind him that day, pretending to be polite. She had that soft smile that never reached her eyes. She looked at me the way someone might look at a waitress who forgot their order, slightly annoyed, slightly superior. "Anthony," I whispered, my throat tightening, "why would you say that?" He sighed, like he was tired of me already. "Mom, you wouldn't fit in. You don't understand how these people are. Eliana's family, they're very proper, very particular about appearances. It would have been awkward." Awkward. That's what I was to him now. The woman who sacrificed her youth, her sleep, her body. Awkward? I wanted to scream, to tell him how cruel he sounded, but instead I just nodded. "I see," I said, though my voice cracked. "I hope you're happy." He didn't even hug me goodbye. When he left that day, I sat in my living room for hours, staring at the small family photo on the shelf, the one from his high school graduation. His arm was around me, and he was smiling proudly. That boy, that smile, didn't exist anymore. For weeks after that, I could barely eat. The silence of my house felt heavier than ever. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it was him calling to apologize. But it never was. You know what's the cruelest part? I found out later that I had actually helped pay for his wedding. See, for years I'd been sending Anthony money for rent, for furniture, for emergencies, around $33,000 in total. I thought I was helping him start his new life, but all that money, it went into impressing his in-laws. They bought a designer suit for him, a luxury venue, catered meals with names I couldn't even pronounce, and I paid for it without knowing. I felt used, not just as a mother, but as a person. After that discovery, something inside me broke. I stopped sending him money. I stopped calling. For the first time in my life, I put myself first. Weeks turned into months, and Anthony barely reached out. The only messages I got were short and cold. "Hope you're doing okay, Mom," or "Things are busy, I'll call you later." That later never came. Then one day, a strange message arrived. It was from Eliana. She wrote, "Anthony and I are struggling financially right now. Could you help us with the down payment for a new car? It would mean a lot." I laughed. Out loud, a dry, bitter laugh. I didn't even reply. Instead, I went to my bank the next day and stopped the automatic transfers I'd been making to their account. I opened a new savings account in my name only and decided that from that moment on, my money, my time, and my heart would belong to me. At first, the silence from their end was almost peaceful. But peace never lasts when people like them are involved. About 2 weeks later, I heard a loud knock at my door. When I opened it, Anthony was standing there, and he wasn't alone. Eliana was next to him, arms crossed, and behind them stood a man in a suit holding a folder. "Mom, we need to talk." I looked at him, at the expensive watch on his wrist, the arrogance in his eyes, and I barely recognized him. "About what?" I asked calmly. Eliana spoke up before he could. "We're concerned about your mental health, Renate." I blinked. "Excuse me?" She exchanged a look with Anthony, who shifted uncomfortably. "You've been acting strange, cutting us off, changing your bank accounts, avoiding calls. We just want to make sure you're okay." I crossed my arms. "And who's this?" I asked, nodding toward the man in the suit. "This is Mr. Keller," she said smoothly. "He's helping us with some paperwork, just standard guardianship forms in case something happens to you." Guardianship. My blood ran cold. I realized then they weren't here to check on me. They were here to take control of my finances, of my life, of everything I had left. Anthony looked at me like he was the reasonable one. "Mom, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. You've always said you wanted to make sure I'm taken care of. This is just formalizing that." I couldn't believe it. My own son, the boy who once cried when he scraped his knee and begged me to kiss it better, was now standing in my house trying to steal everything I had left. I told them to leave. Eliana tried to argue, but I slammed the door shut before she could finish. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from fury. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, thinking about how far I'd fallen in his eyes, from mother to embarrassment, from caregiver to bank account. But something else happened that night, too. I realized I wasn't powerless. The next morning, I called a lawyer. A friend of mine had mentioned an elder rights attorney named Mr. Weber, sharp, discreet, and ruthless when it came to protecting people like me. When I explained my situation, he didn't hesitate. "Renee, this isn't just emotional abuse. This is financial manipulation. They're trying to declare you incompetent so they can control your assets. Don't worry, we'll stop them before they even get close." For the first time in months, I felt safe. Mr. Weber advised me to change my locks, install a security system, and move my remaining savings to a different bank. He helped me draft legal documents preventing anyone, including my son, from making financial decisions on my behalf. Still, I couldn't stop wondering how Anthony could do this. How could a child raised with love become so heartless? And then a small part of me, the mother in me, still hoped he'd realize what he was doing and come back with an apology. But instead, he came back with lawyers. A few weeks later, I received a court notice in the mail. Anthony and Eliana had filed a petition claiming I was mentally unfit to manage my finances. I remember holding that paper in my hands, my eyes stinging with tears. But after the tears came something else, a calmness. Because I knew something they didn't. Karma doesn't rush. It waits. They wanted to take everything from me? Fine, let them try. But life was already preparing a lesson for them, one I wouldn't have to lift a single finger to deliver. You'll see. Because when someone builds their happiness on greed and shame, it doesn't last forever. And the cracks in their perfect world, they were already beginning to show. When I got that court notice, my hands trembled so much I could barely open the envelope. I sat down at my kitchen table, the one Anthony used to do his homework on when he was little, and I read every word until they blurred through my tears. My own son was trying to prove that I had lost my mind. I laughed bitterly. Maybe he had. Maybe the boy I raised had truly gone mad. Mr. Weber assured me he'd handle everything. He said, "They'll have to prove incompetence, Renee, and I've seen the evidence you've kept. Your bills, your receipts, your organized records. They show you're more lucid than most people half your age." He told me not to worry, but how could I not? Every night, I lay awake replaying every argument, every dismissive look Anthony gave me. How did I end up being the villain in his story? When the court date came, I dressed in my best navy blue suit, the same one I wore to his graduation years ago. I wanted to look strong, collected. But inside, I was shaking. The courtroom was cold, the kind of cold that crawls into your bones and stays there. Eliana sat next to Anthony, whispering in his ear, her manicured nails tapping rhythmically on the table. Her parents sat behind them, stiff, polished, wearing looks of quiet superiority, the kind of people who judge you before you even speak. Anthony didn't even look at me, not once. Their lawyer stood up first, a tall man with slicked back hair and an oily voice. "Your Honor, we are here because my clients, Anthony and Eliana, are deeply concerned about the mental and emotional state of Mrs. Renee Fisher. They have witnessed signs of confusion, paranoia, and erratic financial behavior." Confusion? Paranoia? I wanted to laugh. The only confusion was how I'd raised a son capable of such lies. Then Anthony took the stand. My son, my boy, the same child I once carried through rainstorms wrapped in my coat. He spoke softly, playing the role of a worried son. He said, "It's just, she's been acting differently. She sends money, then cuts us off without warning. She forgets conversations we've had. Sometimes she says things that don't make sense. I'm just scared for her." Every word felt like a knife twisting deeper. When it was my turn to speak, I stood tall. My voice trembled at first, but then something inside me, that old motherly strength, pushed through. I said, "I may be old, but I am not crazy. I've supported my son financially for years, over $30,000, because I believed in him. I believed he loved me. But when he told me he was ashamed of me, that's when I realized what was really going on." I turned to Anthony then, and for a brief second our eyes met. He looked away. Mr. Weber presented every piece of evidence, my bank records, letters, and even notes from my doctor confirming my mental fitness. When he was done, the judge looked thoughtful. After a tense silence, she said, "Mrs. Fisher appears mentally competent. The court denies the guardianship petition." For a moment, I could not breathe. Then, like a dam breaking, tears flooded my eyes. I won. Anthony's face turned pale, and Eliana's lips pressed into a thin, furious line. Their lawyer muttered something under his breath and started gathering papers. I walked out of that courtroom feeling lighter than I had in years. I didn't gloat. I didn't say a word. Because the thing about karma, you don't have to announce it. It just waits. For the first time in months, I slept peacefully. The next few weeks were quiet. Too quiet. I knew Anthony and Eliana wouldn't give up easily, but I was done chasing them. I went on with my life, had coffee with my neighbor Eleanor, started painting again, even joined a small book club at the community center. For the first time, I felt free. Then karma began to stir. It started small. Eleanor told me she'd seen Anthony's car parked outside his in-laws' mansion several times, but never for long. She said, "He looks upset, like he doesn't belong there." I brushed it off, but deep down, I knew exactly what that meant. See, Eliana's family, those high-standard people, they never truly accepted him. To them, Anthony was a project, something Eliana could mold, polish, and show off. But the moment the money stopped flowing, my money, their smiles faded. A few months later, I ran into one of Eliana's cousins at the grocery store. She recognized me immediately. Small town, big mouths. "Oh," she said with a smirk, "so you're Anthony's mother?" "Yes," I replied, evenly. "Interesting," she said. "I heard things aren't so perfect for them lately. Her parents are furious, said Anthony can't keep up financially. They were expecting him to take over a business deal, but apparently he doesn't have the means." She rolled her eyes dramatically and walked off. I didn't say a word, but inside, I smiled. That's how karma works. Quietly, perfectly, without needing help. Weeks passed, and then one afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Mom?" Anthony's voice. But it wasn't the confident tone I remembered. It was shaky, small. "Anthony?" I said carefully. "Mom, I just wanted to say hi. How are you?" I stayed silent for a moment, letting the weight of his words hang between us. "I'm fine," I finally said. "Busy. Enjoying life." He hesitated. That's good. Listen, things have been hard. Eliana's family, they're not what I thought they were. They keep talking about money, investments, connections. He stopped mid-sentence, like he didn't know what else to say. "Anthony," I interrupted softly, "you made your choice. You wanted a life with high-standard people. Now you have it." He sighed. "I know. I miss how things used to be." I didn't respond, because part of me wanted to comfort him, but another part remembered the humiliation, the court hearing, the way he'd looked through me like I was nothing. We hung up soon after. A few days later, I heard from Eleanor again. "Did you see the news?" she asked. "Eliana's father's company is under investigation. Some financial scandal, embezzlement or something." I nearly dropped my cup of tea. The headlines that week were everywhere. Eliana's family's company had been accused of massive fraud, falsifying records, dodging taxes, the works. Their assets were frozen, their mansion raided, their names plastered all over the media. And Anthony? He was right in the middle of it. Not as a suspect, at least not yet, but as the son-in-law who suddenly had nowhere to go. He lost his job, his apartment, and whatever status he thought he had. The in-laws who once looked down on me now wanted nothing to do with him. I never said a word, never gloated, never called, because I didn't have to. A few weeks later, I got another call. This time he didn't sound angry or proud, just broken. "Mum," he whispered, "I'm sorry." I said nothing. I just listened. He started crying. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought if I married into money, I could give you a better life someday. But they never cared about me. I was just decoration." I closed my eyes. For the first time, I heard my son again. Not the man who hurt me, but the boy I raised. "Anthony," I said softly, "sometimes the universe gives us exactly what we think we want, just to show us how wrong we were." He didn't respond, but I could hear him breathing, slow, shaky, remorseful. "Mum, can I come home?" he finally asked. That question broke something inside me, because even though I wanted to say yes, even though my heart ached for him, I knew that letting him back so soon would undo everything I'd fought for. "You need to find your own home first, Anthony," I said quietly. You need to learn who you are without someone else's approval. He sniffled. Okay. When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, staring out the window. The sky was gray, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel heavy. I felt balanced. Karma had done its work. But life wasn't done yet, because while Anthony's pride had been shattered, something deeper was about to crumble. The illusion of his perfect marriage. And trust me, when that fell apart, it would be the final lesson he'd never forget. It was about 3 months after that last call when I heard from Anthony again. Only this time, it wasn't a phone call. It was a knock at my door. When I opened it, he was standing there, but it wasn't the same Anthony who'd once looked at me with disdain and superiority. He was thinner, pale, with dark circles under his eyes. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair unkempt, and he looked lost.
"Mom," he whispered. For a moment, I couldn't move. Every part of me wanted to hold him, to take him inside and make him a cup of tea like I used to. But then I remembered his words, "It didn't want them to know you're my mother." The memory hit like a slap. I stepped aside without speaking. He walked in slowly like he wasn't sure he belonged there anymore. He sat down on the same couch where we'd once laughed together watching old movies. Now, the silence between us felt like miles of frozen air. "Do you want some tea?" I finally asked. He nodded. His voice cracked when he said, "Please." When I came back with 2 cups, I noticed he was staring at the family photo on the wall, the one from his graduation. "You still have that?" he murmured. "Of course I do," I said simply. He rubbed his hands together, avoiding my eyes. "Eliana left me," he said finally. I didn't react, just waited. She said she couldn't handle the stress. Her parents lost everything, the house, the business, even their cars. And when things got tough, he swallowed hard. She said she made a mistake marrying someone without her family's class. She walked out. His voice broke on the last word. I took a slow sip of tea. "I'm sorry, Anthony." He looked up at me then, eyes filled with pain. "Aren't you angry?" I met his gaze. Angry? No. I was angry for a long time, but I realized anger only hurts the one who holds it. I don't need to punish you, Anthony. Life already has. He flinched. We sat there in silence for a while, and then he said quietly, "I was so stupid. I thought I could buy respect. I thought if I acted like them, I'd be someone important. You were always important, but not for what you owned, for who you were." His eyes filled with tears. I don't even know who that is anymore. I reached over and placed my hand on his. Then start figuring it out. You're not dead yet. That night he stayed in the guest room. I could hear him crying softly through the wall. Not loud, not dramatic, just broken. In the morning, I made breakfast, simple eggs and toast, and he ate quietly like a man who hadn't had a real meal in weeks. When he was done, he looked at me and said, "Mom, can I stay here for a while? Just until I find a job?" I hesitated. A part of me screamed yes, the mother in me, the part that would do anything to protect him. But another part whispered no, the part that remembered all the years I was treated like an outsider in my own son's life. "I think you should find your own place, Anthony. You're grown now. You need to learn to stand on your own feet." He nodded slowly. "I understand." That week, he found a small room to rent nearby. I helped him look for a job, not because I wanted to rescue him, but because I wanted to see him learn how to rescue himself. He started working at a local car dealership, earning enough to pay his rent and bills.
It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and for the first time in his life, I saw him humble. He'd come over sometimes for dinner, always bringing something small, a loaf of bread, a plant, a bottle of cheap wine, and he'd thank me every single time. But karma wasn't done yet. It never is until the lesson is complete. One evening, he showed up looking troubled. I asked what was wrong, and he sighed deeply. "It's Eliana. She called me." I raised an eyebrow. "What did she want?" He hesitated. "She said she misses me, that she made a mistake leaving. She's been struggling since her family's money disappeared. She wants to talk about getting back together." I stared at him for a long moment. "And what do you think?" He looked down. "Part of me still loves her, Mom, but another part of me knows she doesn't love me. She loves what I can give her." I nodded slowly. "So what are you going to do?" He sighed. "I don't know." I leaned forward. "Anthony, listen to me. The people who value you only when you can offer them something will always leave when the offering ends. You don't need someone who loves your image. You need someone who loves your truth." He nodded, eyes glistening. "You're right." But I could tell he was still torn. A few weeks later, I got another call, this time from one of Eleanor's friends who worked at a local cafe. "You won't believe who I saw. Eliana, with another man. And not just any man, one of her father's old business partners." I didn't say a word. I just listened. When Anthony came over that night, I knew I couldn't protect him from this. Karma had one more card to play, and it was going to hurt. He told me he'd decided to meet Eliana for dinner. He said, "She says she's changed," he said quietly. I didn't stop him. I just said, "Be careful what you believe." The next day, he came back with red eyes. He didn't have to say anything. I already knew. "She only wanted money," he whispered. "She said her accounts were frozen and she needed help getting back on her feet. When I told her I couldn't, she left. Again." He let out a shaky laugh. "She didn't even say goodbye." I reached out and took his hand. "Now you understand, don't you?" He nodded. "I do." That night he stayed again, not as a lost man, but as a son trying to make peace with the mess he'd created. We talked for hours, really talked, about his childhood, his father, his dreams. Somewhere in that conversation, the wall between us finally crumbled.
And in that moment, I realized something. Revenge doesn't always come in flames and fury. Sometimes it comes in silence, in the slow, painful realization of truth. Anthony had lost everything he thought mattered: money, status, approval, and what he found instead was himself. And maybe that was the greatest punishment and the greatest redemption all at once. Over the next few months, he changed, truly changed. He apologized to me again, not with words this time, but with actions. He started visiting regularly, fixing things around the house, cooking dinner with me. Sometimes we'd sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun go down, and he'd say softly, "Thank you, Mom, for not giving up on me." And every time he said it, I'd smile and think, "That's karma, my son. You finally met her, and she turned you into someone I can be proud of again." But the world still had one more twist left for good. Because a few months later, I got an invitation in the mail. From Eliana. Yes, that Eliana. And what it said left me speechless. The envelope was gold, the kind of thick, expensive paper people use when they want to impress you. My name was printed in elegant cursive, Mrs. Renate Cooper. For a moment, I thought it was some kind of mistake. But when I opened it, my hands froze. It was an invitation to the grand launch of Eliana & Co. Luxury Lifestyle Boutique. At the bottom, in gold ink, hosted by Eliana Carter and family. Location, the Carlton Hotel Ballroom. I stared at it for a long time, not out of anger this time, but disbelief. After everything, after breaking my son, after humiliating me, after walking away when her empire fell, she was back, dressed in gold ink and arrogance, and she wanted me there. I couldn't understand why. Maybe it was pity. Maybe she wanted to parade her success again. Maybe she thought I was too small to matter, and my presence would just be another spectator to her shining comeback. But something in me said, go. So I did. The night of the launch, I put on my best navy blue dress. Not new, but neat, pressed, dignified. I wore my late husband's bracelet, the one that Anthony had given me when he was 8, with tiny charms that jingled when I moved. When I arrived, the ballroom was stunning. Crystal chandeliers, golden centerpieces, champagne glasses lined in perfect rows. The guests shimmered in diamonds and silk. And there, at the center of it all, was Eliana. She looked radiant, or maybe desperate. Her smile was stretched too wide, her laughter too sharp. She was talking to reporters, posing for photos, pretending the world hadn't seen her family crumble just a year ago. When she noticed me, her face flickered, just for a second, before she composed herself and walked over. "Well," she said with a practiced smile, "you came." "I did," I replied calmly. "You invited me." She laughed, the sound brittle. "Of course. I wanted to show there are no hard feelings." I tilted my head. "Between us?" She said quickly, "Between all of us. Anthony, too. I heard he's working." The word almost tasted sour in her mouth. "Yes, he's doing well. Happier than I've seen him in years." Her smile faltered. That's good." Before she could say more, a man approached, tall, gray suit, the kind of confidence that comes from money. He said, "Eliana," not even glancing at me, "the investors are waiting." She stiffened slightly, then turned back to me. "Enjoy the evening, Mrs. Cooper. There's champagne by the bar." And with that, she walked away. But as the night went on, I started noticing something strange. People whispering, glancing around, a few investors leaving quietly, a man at the bar muttering, "She should have waited for the approvals." Then a sudden commotion near the stage. The lights flickered. The projector that was showing Eliana's new brand presentation froze and then glitched into something else entirely. On the massive screen behind her, rows of financial statements appeared. Transactions, unpaid invoices, investor emails, all with her signature. The room fell silent. Eliana froze mid-sentence. Someone gasped, "She forged the contracts!" And then another voice, "The bank already pulled out of her deal." The murmurs grew into chaos. Phones came out, cameras clicked. Her partner, that tall man, stormed off the stage, muttering, "You've ruined everything." Eliana's face went pale. She turned to the audience, stammering, "There's been a mistake. Someone hacked." But no one listened. The investors were gone. The sponsors were gone. And soon, the reporters were circling like vultures. I stood quietly in the corner, watching. Not with joy, not with vengeance, but with the deep, still silence of justice. Her downfall was complete, not because I had done anything, but because the same vanity she once used to humiliate others had become her own noose. I left before the chaos peaked. As I walked out of the hotel, I saw Anthony standing outside. He looked at me with wide eyes. "You came?" "I did," I said softly. He looked past me at the flashing lights inside. "I heard what happened. She's finished, Mom. Completely finished." I nodded. "Karma always knows the address, son, even when we don't send it the invitation." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "You always say things like that." "Because they're true," I said. We stood there for a moment, the cool night breeze wrapping around us. For the first time in years, he reached over and hugged me, not as a child, not as a man seeking forgiveness, but as a son finally at peace. When he pulled back, his eyes were calm. "I'm done chasing people who never saw my worth," he said. "I'm going to build my own life now, one I can be proud of." I smiled. That's all I ever wanted. As we walked to the car, I looked back one last time. Through the hotel's glass doors, I could see Eliana, still standing on that stage, her gold dress under harsh white light, her hands trembling. And I thought, that's not my revenge, that's hers. The life she built on lies finally coming to collect its due. For a long time after that night, I didn't hear from Eliana. The city talked, of course. The news spread faster than fire on dry grass. Her investors pulled out. Her store shut down before it ever truly opened. And the family she'd married into? They dropped her the minute the headlines hit. The same high-standard in-laws who once looked at her like a prized jewel now refused even take her calls. Her father-in-law reportedly told a journalist, "We have no connection to that woman. She deceived us all." Poetic, isn't it? The world she had built to impress fell apart the exact same way she'd once tried to destroy mine. Publicly, painfully, and with everyone watching. Anthony didn't gloat. He didn't even mention her name anymore. He moved out of that cramped apartment and started working for a small construction firm. Hard work, honest money, the kind of life he used to think was beneath him. I visited him one Sunday morning. He had paint on his hands, a cup of cheap coffee in one hand, and music playing from an old radio. And when he looked at me, there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Peace. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, setting the mug down. "For everything. For making you feel small when you were the only one who ever made me feel safe." I smiled, my throat tightening. "We all lose our way, Anthony. What matters is that you found yours again." He nodded. "Do you ever think about her?" I sighed. "Sometimes, but not with anger anymore. I just hope she learns, the way we all do, eventually." He stared at me for a moment, then said softly, "You're stronger than I ever realized." I laughed lightly. "No, I just learned how to let go of people who were never mine to hold." That night, when I returned home, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea. The air was cool, the city lights blinking below like tiny stars fallen to earth. For the first time in years, my chest didn't feel heavy. The silence wasn't lonely anymore. It was peace.
You know, people think revenge is about payback, about watching the person who hurt you suffer. But the truth, the real revenge, is healing. It's living so fully that their betrayal becomes irrelevant. Still, I won't lie, watching karma do its job felt like closure. Life has its own timing, its own sense of balance. Eliana taught me that. And maybe in her own twisted way, she gave me a gift. The gift of rediscovering who I am without needing to prove my worth to anyone. A few months later, I decided to move. I sold my old house, the one with too many memories, and found a cozy apartment by the sea. Every morning, I wake up to the sound of waves. And sometimes, when I sip my coffee on the balcony, I think about everything that happened. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the silence, the victory that came disguised as loss. And I realize life isn't about who invited you to their table. It's about building your own, setting it by the ocean, and never lowering your standards for people who don't know your value. A few days ago, I got a message from Eliana. It was short. I'm sorry. You didn't deserve how I treated you. I lost everything. I hope you're doing better. I stared at it for a while. Then I smiled. And I didn't reply. Some apologies aren't meant to be answered. They're meant to be lived with. Because forgiveness doesn't always need words. Sometimes it's just peace. So, to everyone listening, if anyone ever makes you feel small because you're not enough for their world, remember this. One day that same world will crumble, and they'll realize you were the only real thing they ever had. Don't chase people who measure worth in money or titles. Let them go. Karma doesn't need your help. It just needs time. What would you have done in my place? Would you have fought back, or let life handle it like I did? Be honest. Tell me in the comments. I really want to know how far my story has traveled. And if you're still here listening to me, thank you. Give it a like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that revenge doesn't always come with fire. Sometimes it comes with calm. Because in the end, peace is the loudest kind of revenge.